Guys, I have another video for you today, and we are doing lesson 9-5, and we're still solving quadratic equations, and we have all these different methods that we've used so far. We've done the factoring to solve these quadratic equations. We've done graphing, used the Desmos graphing calculator. We've taken the square roots. Last section we did completing the square, and from that completing the square, we've over time been able to develop a nice formula that helps us find all the real solutions to a quadratic formula, okay, a quadratic equation, and we can use what we call the quadratic formula. So any equation that is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, we can use the quadratic formula to figure out what our solutions are. So the quadratic formula is given, we can find any x by taking negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and then all of that is divided by 2a. Now we'll talk about later where this formula comes from, but a, b, and c in this formula refer to the coefficients and the constant that is given in the quadratic equation. Okay, so your assignment today was on page 587, numbers 1 through 15 odd. Okay, so I'll kind of do some of the even questions to kind of help you figure out how to do some of these. Now you want to always make sure that your quadratic equation is in that form. So for example, like number 4, notice you have x squared plus 3x equals 12. That's not in the proper form yet. We need to subtract that 12 to the other side. And now we can use our quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. And now we can use that formula and plug in what we know from our equation. So our coefficient for a is 1. That's the coefficient on the x squared. So the a is going to equal 1. B is going to equal 3. That's the coefficient for the x. And c is going to equal negative 12 because that is my constant. So now if I plug in everything I know, negative b, so negative 3 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 3 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 12, divided by 2 times a, which is 1. And now we can solve all of that out, and we know that 3 squared is 9, minus negative 12 times 1 is negative 12, and then negative 12 times negative 4 is positive 48. So 9 plus 48, and then all that is divided by 2, and we can keep going. 48 plus 9 is 57, so we have the square root of 57, so negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 57 divided by 2. And now we can split that apart to find our two different answers. So negative 3 plus the square root of 57 divided by 2, and negative 3 minus the square root of 57 divided by 2. And now we can plug that into our calculators to get our answer. And we want to make sure we're rounding to the nearest tenth because that is what our directions tell us to do, is to round to the nearest tenth. So negative 3 plus the square root of 57 and then divide by 2. So x for this part could be 2.3, or x for the negative part, so now I'm going to do negative 3 minus the square root of 57 and then divide by 2, and that one is negative 5.3. Okay, so that would be that'd be a question like number 4. Now with question like Number 2, which I didn't talk about, it's already in the form. You don't need to move anything. You can just plug it into the formula. Okay? So I hope that was helpful. I hope that makes sense. With questions 7 and 9, you can choose whatever method you want. If you want to just continue using the quadratic formula, you can. If you want to use a Desmos graphing calculator, you can. You just need to state what method you're using. If you want to use factoring, go for it. Okay, any of those methods that we have learned so far that you want to apply, go for it. Now with questions 11 and 13, you have to state the value of the discriminant. And what's nice about the discriminant is that unfortunately with these quadratics, there's not always a real solution. Okay, and that gets into another discussion about imaginary numbers and really abstract math that we're not going to talk about in Basic Algebra 1. But just know that there is a way to figure out, okay, does my quadratic equation have solutions, real solutions that I can find? So with like question 11, we have x squared minus 9x plus 21 equals 0. So I'm going to write that out. I can find the discriminant here to figure out, okay, does my quadratic equation have solutions, real solutions that I can find? And the way I do that is by using that part of the quadratic formula that is underneath the root or the radical sign. And to figure it out, the formula for this one is just the b squared minus 4ac. Right? And that's the discriminant. And if my number is negative, if I get a negative number out of this, that means there are 0 real solutions that I can find. If my number is 0, when I find this, I have 1 real solution. And if my number is positive, then I have 2 real solutions. Okay, so there are 3 different answers I can get for it. So I have to state the value I get and then determine how many solutions there are. So if I am using this formula, well, b is negative 9, a is 1, and c is 21. And if I plug all of that in, I get b squared, so negative 9 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 21. Well, negative 9 squared is 81, minus 4 times 1 times 21. So basically 4 times 21, which is 84. And what I get is 81 minus 84, which is negative 3. And if we remember right, negative 3, since it's a negative, means that we have 0 real solutions. Okay, so my answer for that would be negative 3 and then no real solutions. Now, the reason why this trick works, where does this come from? Well, keep in mind that the b squared minus 4ac was always under a radical sign or a square root. And if that number is negative, for example, we got negative 3 when we plugged it in. If I try to take the square root of negative 3, that is not a real number. That is what we call an imaginary number. And like I said, I'm not going to get into that too much, but just know that that's not a real solution because nothing times itself will give you negative 3. Okay, it's not possible. There's no real solution here. So that's where that trick comes from, is saying, okay, if this number here gives you a negative, then there are no real solutions that will work because nothing times itself is negative. If you get 0, well, then 0 times 0 is the only thing that gives you 0 there. And then if you get positive, then you can find 2 numbers that will still work. So that's where the discriminant comes from here, and that's how you would use it. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. I hope it makes sense, and if you need extra help, please email me, and I'll do my best that I can to get back to you and answer your question. I hope you're doing well. I hope you have a great day, and thanks for staying up to date on all this stuff. Okay, thanks.